Okay, welcome, my friends, for what I hope is an enlightening discussion about China's fast-growing MMA scene and the incredible people behind this rise. While there are some familiar faces in this group, I want to take a moment to quickly introduce myself for those of us watching at home, for our viewers at home, rather. My name is Matt Botsons, and I am the managing editor at RADII, the executive producer behind the new two-part documentary that you just watched, Way of the Warrior. RADII is an independent platform of artists, writers, and creators dedicated to showing the rarely explored sides of New China. Through multimedia content and events, we shine a light on topics which bring young global thinkers together. For those watching at home, you can visit us at www.radiichina.com. Joining me today is a selection of people involved in the creation of Way of the Warrior. I'll start by introducing the esteemed athletes on this panel. First, Shiming from North China's Heilongjiang province and is a professional MMA fighter representing China Catch Wrestling. She began her martial arts journey as a champion Taekwondo athlete and later began catch wrestling. She now trains at the UFC Performance Institute, Shanghai. Next, we have Cholin, known to fans and rivals alike as the Tibetan Knight. Cholin is from China's Sichuan province and previously trained at the well-known Embo Fight Club. Like Shiming, he is currently training at the UFC Performance Institute, Shanghai. Kevin Chang is a Honolulu native and is the senior vice president of UFC, the world's premier MMA organization. He was a driving force in establishing the UFC and its Performance Institute in Shanghai, the world's largest and most advanced MMA training facility. And also joining us on this panel are two of the masterminds behind the documentary, executive producer Brian Wong and director Billy Starman. Billy previously worked with Vice China and released his first full-length documentary, The Story of Iron Mike, in November of 2017. He left Vice in 2019 to co-found Homework Productions to pursue his passion for creating world-class documentaries. And last but certainly not least, Brian A. Wong is the founder and chairman of RADII. Welcome, all of you. And a warm welcome to everyone joining us at home. As time today is limited, I'm going to dive right into the questions. Now, to kick things off, let's start with Kevin. So Kevin, while researching the content supporting this documentary, we heard a lot about how China's traditional fighting styles are worlds apart from MMA, rather, and how disciplines such as Kung Fu have little relevance in modern combat sports. Can you respond to this and perhaps offer an alternative viewpoint or examples of how China's martial arts traditions have influenced the UFC and MMA more broadly?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Firstly, I would start by acknowledging that martial arts as a category has its origins in China, and they're so diverse that it's hard to kind of pinpoint exactly what people mean when they say traditional fighting styles. There's so many of them, and for our sport in particular, the sport of mixed martial arts, it really incorporates all of the disciplines. Right. Gone are the days that a single discipline can really dominate in our sport. Every single one of our athletes and our competitors have multiple tools in the tool belt, as they say. They all need to know how to grapple. They all need to know how to wrestle. They all need to know how to strike. And there's different ways of approaching that, suiting your natural inherent abilities, where you train, everything else. And so, especially when you have, an international competition such as ours, where the best of the best are competing, all of these athletes are constantly looking for an edge. They're looking for an advantage over their opponent. Oftentimes, that comes with new techniques and new styles. I mean, you see so many examples of this through the years, where a particular fighter is able to implement a strategy that involves a certain discipline. Take John Jones with the oblique kick, or the calf kicks that are starting to become very popular in our sport as well. That's what drives the evolution of the styles that you see in the octagon. So, in my perspective, traditional fighting styles from China, like Sanda and Shuai Jiao, we're just only beginning to see them now emerge in the sport of MMA, and those are certainly traditional fighting styles from China. That have yet to really be incorporated on a large scale outside of our athletes from China who already know them and employ them. Torchbearers being Zhang Weili, Yan Xiaonan, who was a Sandai champion, Song Yadong, they're showing the rest of our roster, hey, there are other techniques that you might not have discovered before. They're very effective. How do you incorporate? And they are absolutely showcasing these styles and when they compete. And so, given their success, I believe going forward that you will see more and more, again, traditional fighting styles from China starting to emerge with potentially non-Chinese fighters, and it'll further push its presence within competition in the UFC. So that's kind of how I view Chinese fighting styles, their roots, and where they are currently within our competition.
Yeah, I mean it's one of those things in researching MMA in China for this documentary. I think one thing we all walked away at is at a very basic level, even just the fact that a lot of these kung fu greats were so integrated into American Hollywood and American pop culture. They in their own right kind of contributed to the rise and interest of this new sport. So fascinating,
Absolutely.
fascinating
Yeah,
topic here.
as you say, I mean, we credit Bruce Lee with being the father of mixed martial arts, and that is directly from China. So it's new to this modern era. China is, coming into this now. I think there's just so much growth that you're going to see going forward in the years to come.
Brilliant, thank you, Kevin. Um, For my next question, Mr. Billy Starman, I'm going to direct this one towards you. So, capturing the complexities of MMA's rise to prominence in China is no easy task. There's a lot to cover. For example, the nation's long and rich history with martial arts, the unique and diverse stories of fighters from a wide range of cultural and socioeconomic backgrounds, and of course, the trials and tribulations of competing overseas in the U.S. When you were planning and executing this documentary, how did you prioritize your focus areas and weave the various threads into a cohesive story?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, Matt, there are so many stories that could be told about the Chinese combat sport. And we can only pick a few to put in this documentary. So when it comes to the fighting sports in China, I'll think of the debate between the traditional martial arts and the modern combat sport, and the short but rich story of MMA in China, and such other such topics. After doing a lot of research and discussion within the RADII team, we decided not to talk too much about the history because it's too long. We try to set the time to the present and document some of the the wonderful people and the thing, because like in the recent few years, I feel like the young people around me, they got more and more passion in the combat sports. So MMA sports definitely like got more and more popular in China. We want to show the current development of the Chinese MMA sports to the worldwide audience. So our film was shot in 2021, and the very important context here is the global outbreak of the COVID. So I think the COVID situation also affected the development of the combat sport in China. There are a lot of suspensions of many events and the reductions of the communication in the sport. We should see more UFC fights in China, and more fighters came to train at the PI, but now it had to be suspended. So it's quite a tough time for Chinese MMA athletes, and it's more difficult for them to achieve a better result in the UFC. So in this case, we choose to put the focus more on the players' personal stories. They're struggling, they're hardworking, they have different backgrounds, different genders. There are some common threads in their stories, like their dedication to the sports, and the sports had given back to them. So those are the things like make the professional sports great, right? So the fact that the Chinese are embracing this emerging sports, and some people's fortunes are changing with it. So that's the most fascinating points of this story, and we want to show it to the world audience the most.
Yeah, I think you guys did a good job, and I tend to agree that the actual personal stories of the fighters, I think, is far more interesting than just diving into the history of MMA and combat sports in China, because it's such a huge topic, right? You could write a book about it. So I think you took the right approach.
Yeah, I think the stories of those young athletes very, very important to be documented, because like if we talk about the history too much, the audience, it's going to be quite hard for them to understand. If we focus on the current situation, we can tell the untold stories of the upcoming athletes. I think it will be much better for the whole world to get a view of Chinese MMA sports.
Brilliant. Thanks, Billy. So we're gonna pivot now a little bit, and I'm gonna actually ask some questions to our athletes that are joining us today. So I'm gonna start with Cholin. And my question for you is, as an athlete in one of the most challenging and rigorous sports, what keeps you motivated to be so committed to your work and try so hard for success? Who have been some of your role models both in China and overseas?
我从小开始就接触这个就是散打，然后我的榜样的话肯定是我们干爹恩波，因为他从小培养我们，然后教会我们就是如何去坚持，如何去就是实现自己的梦想。然后刚开始接触散打之后，就发现有这个综合格斗，然后那时候在国内刚开始发展，然后就15年左右就接触这个。到现在目前一直没有放弃，因为我们队有一些很多优秀的选手也放弃了，中途有各种原因，各种生病各方面就放弃了这项运动，然后没有坚持到最后。到现在坚持到最后的人也特别少，然后不像以前一样，刚开始有很多人在发生很多事情以后就没有坚持下来，然后到现在的坚持就是来到这个 PI UFC，然后下一个目标就是更希望就是自己实现自己的梦想，就是达到最高境界赛事 UFC，这就是我的梦想和目标。目前。
Brilliant. Thank you, Cholin. So MMA truly attracts people from all different walks of life. And you, Shiming, I think you are a prime example of that. You were professionally trained in traditional Chinese medicine as a healer, and now you hit people in the octagon. How do you reconcile these two seemingly incompatible life ways? And do you find one of them more empowering than the other, or do both play an equal role in your identity?
Yeah, sometimes I wondered about it myself, but actually they two are surprisingly suitable with each other. I chose traditional Chinese medicine in university, but later I find out that I would be fighting in octagon, trying to knock out my opponents. Well, life is funny sometimes, but actually the two are suitable with each other. I know how to rehabilitation, trying to help myself or other fighters recover from injury, and also I can doing fighting sports what I really like. I really happy that I know these two things and I can combination together.
And Shuming, you mentioned obviously like rehabilitation as, an element of your traditional Chinese medicine training and how that kind of integrates with your work in the UFC and MMA more broadly. Now, can you also tell us, do you ever use your kind of inside knowledge of traditional Chinese medicine and health practices to help you during fights? Is that something that you've drawn upon before?
Yeah, we can avoid to get injured from training. So not only I help myself, but also I help my teammates to recover their injury.
Thank you so much. So my next question is going to be directed actually at both of the athletes, and to keep things simple so people aren't talking over each other. Shuming, you can answer first, and Qiulun, you can answer second. So tell us a bit about how you work with your coaches. I think a lot of people will find that very fascinating. Can you explain a little bit the role they play and have played in your development, and what makes a strong athlete and trainer bond?
I have been training in a lot of gyms, both in China and abroad, but it wasn't until I met my current catch wrestling and MMA coach that I realized that I made a lot of mistakes along the way. There are levels to this sport. Coach Barger is international level coach, which is completely different than city level or premise level coaches. For example, he has been teaching us Caucasus style of wrestling way before even anyone who know Habib or Chimaev. So I'm really lucky to meet this coach to learn the best style of wrestling with him. With deep coaching knowledge behind me like that, I know I can become UFC champion someday. It just takes time to learn. So to answer your question, I think the main thing of a strong relationship between a fighter and a coach is that coach's practical knowledge and the technique level that is actually useful for fighters. Definitely not those 10-year contracts or they pay me to stay here. They pressure fighters to stay in gym. Our coach never pressure us or write any kind of binding contracts. We are free to leave CCW anytime and go to other gyms. But actually, we want to stay here ourselves because we cannot learn his technique from anywhere else.
It sounds like a very fruitful and amicable relationship. And, obviously we look forward to hopefully seeing you win a UFC championship sometime in the very near future, we hope, Shiming. So thank you so much. So I'm going to direct the same question now at Cholin. Cholin, would you like to elaborate a little bit on the role coaches have played in your development and what makes a strong athlete-trainer bond?
也就跟老师一样的嘛，教一些我不擅长的东西。我来到 PI 的话，就也是我是站立性出身的那种，然后再到这的时候，摔跤、柔术，然后这些是我的缺点，然后教练就会说是该加强什么，该加强摔跤，该加强柔术这方面，然后就觉得进步我缺点，然后也教会我一些我自己不足的地方吧，这样。就是一个老师，特别好的老师那种。
I guess as a follow-up question, does Cholin, do you find that you've developed close friendships with some of the people that you've been training with, even outside of the realm of MMA and outside of the gym?
第一是有些教练肯定会尊重，是吧？尊重教练，但是有些教练会下来，他自己也会说，我们下来是要么是兄弟，要么这样。但是跟在 PI 的教练，新教练他们几个的话，肯定会再下来没有那么去相处，因为我们沟通不来那种交流那方面。但是在国内的我自己教练王教练，肯定会在上课的时候肯定是教练会教我一些东西，但是在私底下也会沟通的很好，就感觉跟好大哥一样的，就是生活中的有些不懂的也会去问他，他也会教我们一些生活中的就很多东西吧。训练的时候是教练，但是在私底下也会生活中的有一些帮助。
Well, Cholin, I'm glad to hear that you've been able to develop, meaningful bonds with the people that you're working with to advance your career. That's obviously very important. And I think I speak on behalf of the entire Way of the Warrior team when I tell both Shiming and Cholin that we've been monitoring your careers very closely and your growth. And we're very, very excited on what the future holds. And you definitely have us all rooting for you on the journey ahead. So now I'm gonna pivot back a little bit here, and I'm gonna throw a question Kevin's way. So Mr. Kevin, sports can often get wrapped up in nationalism, but I believe that it also has the power to bridge peoples through mutual love of sport and competition. How has the UFC worked to create create an environment of cultural understanding through its expansion in Asia and more broadly around the world? And what do you see as the key factors that will really allow UFC and MMA in general to take off in China in a way that you and the organization hope?
Success in sports competition, it always serves as a source of pride for a country. Our sport, perhaps in different ways than others, actually. This is particularly true when you're talking about major international sports competitions like the Olympics or the FIFA World Cup, or marquee global professional organizations like the NBA or Wimbledon. I mean, that naturally is going to attract global attention. And so as the platform for the best of the best mixed martial artists in the world to compete, the UFC puts a spotlight on athletes from all countries. And success in the octagon, mixed with their personal stories of overcoming hardship and adversity, that really appeal to the human being in all of us, that is what adores them to the fan base as they serve as inspirational figures for their country in a sense. So this is undeniable. It's not rocket science either. It's the so-called Yao Ming effect. Easier said than done, of course, but it's very powerful. It's very real, and certain athletes can transcend the borders of their own countries and create cultural bridges through their performances. So this, of course, lies at the core of our strategy to invest in the Performance Institute, to establish the UFC Academy, to recruit through the Combine, and create different pathways into the UFC in order to broaden the talent pool and make more opportunities for these types of things to happen and the next generation of mixed martial artists to rise up from this region. And that's really how I see sort of, our main priority as with regards to talent development and reasoning behind it.
Brilliant. Well, I think you guys have done a pretty bang up job. Obviously, I've been out to the Performance Institute, and it's a hell of a facility.
Yeah, that's we benchmarked it against the best sports facilities in the world. So it is the world's largest mixed martial arts facility, but it's on par with what you would see in professional football teams in Europe, rugby, cycling. I mean, we really did a deep dive into what makes all of these facilities special. What are the needs? How do we best serve, putting the athlete at the center of it all? But there's other stakeholders, of course, involved, right? It serves as the headquarters for our entire Asia operation. It also, is an opportunity for us to allow fans to come in, experience it, have a very authentic touch point. It provides us with hospitality opportunities and educational opportunities for sponsors and media. I mean, it's really the hub of what we do out here in the region, and it's only one of two in the world. In coming years, I think that they will start to open these in other countries as well.
Brilliant. Well, we're very excited to see what the future holds. And obviously, thank you for sharing your insight with us. Greatly appreciated. I'm going to wrap today's discussion up with a joint question again. And I'm going to fire this one over at our film team, our filmmakers, if you will. So this one's for you, Brian and Billy. So having worked on this project, I am fully aware that Way of the Warrior was made to show how MMA can act as a conduit for cultural connection and understanding, and as the basis for powerful friendships as well, as I think we've seen a little bit today. Do you feel that the finished product has achieved these goals? And can you give me an example of a scene in the documentary or an aspect of the film that you found particularly impacting?
Yeah, I definitely think like we achieved the goal we set in the beginning. I have a lot of respect for each and every character that appears in the film, like a lot of respect, whether it's coaches or athletes, But like what impressed me most is not the certain scenes, but like it's all their expression through the film. All the athletes, when they talk about something, they have some glint, they have some sparkle in their eyes. For example, when Weili talks about how she is becoming better athlete, that's a glint in her eyes. When Shiming chat about like her fighting styles and how she will extend her athlete career as long as possible, she's gonna become the world champion one day, there's a glint in her eyes. And when Cholin talks about like his desire to fight in the UFC before he headed to America for the contender fight, there's a glint in his eyes. And when Sun Yadong talks about what he learned and the process he has been made in the United States, that was that glint in his eyes. I think the love of the sports and the pursuit of the higher athletic skills and the shaping of one's way of seeing the world through the sports, through MMA, is what we call like the sportsmanship, right? Like I think I saw that spirit in all those athletes, and I'm honored to capture it and to capture the shining side of the young Chinese people, in this documentary.
Thank you so much. And I tend to agree with you. I think you did a great job. But we'll pivot to Brian now and find out what his thoughts are. Mr. Wong, I mean, how do you feel with the finished product? As executive producer, do you feel that it's done its job? And, is there any particular scenes in it that you found, moving or that really touched you, personally?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Listen, I would echo a lot of what Billy said in terms of the individual characters. I think the thing that really impressed me most was the dedication and commitment that everyone, sort of exhibited in the pursuit of their dreams. The individual athletes, Shiming in terms of trying to go against, stereotypes of what women should do. The fact that, she's taking a road that is really challenging, where initially there wasn't a lot of resources available to train her, and she stuck with it. And now she's here at the UFC Performance Institute, says a lot about the tenacity that she's showing. Qiulun, coming from his background and really dedicating himself to this. No route to a championship or potential championship position is easy, and he's really committed himself to this. And the contender fight was a fantastic fight. And even despite the result, he's seeing the benefits of what he's doing and how he's building his career one step at a time. And that's very admirable. And then I think the UFC as a organization, the commitment that they're making to China, but also to the sport as a whole in terms of globalizing this sport. I mean, so impressive. Building something in the time that they have to really create probably one of the most challenging, competitive, and rigorous athletic competitions out there. So in Song Yadong, I think one of the things that really touched me about his story is how he was brave enough to go to the US, no background, in terms of connections there, people that he knew. He just went for it because he knew that training with Uriah was the best place for him. And, he's just lighting up the stage in the octagon in his performance. Very inspiring. So all those stories really touched me and made me feel that we've achieved our goal with this film. And I just want to say about Billy, what a fantastic director. We didn't actually know where this was headed. I've learned in this process that the documentary writes itself. The director has to adapt to the events that take place. If you're making a fictional film, you control the story, you write the story. But in a documentary, the story writes itself, and you have to figure out how to highlight the best points in that story. Billy has an uncanny ability and skill to capture those stories in a way that really highlight the universal principles, the things that bring us together as human beings, regardless of your cultural background, your nationality. And I think he did that in such a special way that I'm just thrilled that we were able to work with him on this, and very happy with the outcome of these films. So that would be my take, and I hope we can do a lot more together with everyone here. And thank you to the UFC for supporting this project, and the athletes for taking the time to let us follow them around.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Like the great man said, pain is temporary and film is forever, right? So
right.
We got the film.
We got through this. It was a labor of love. I mean, it started a year ago and we thought it'd be done in 3 months, and COVID did not make it easy, but everyone was so cooperative. And Kevin, you're just so awesome to bring in, your team to support us, and Shiming and Qiulun and Song Yadong and all the coaches, Richie and everyone else were fantastic.
Yeah, I hope that it serves its purpose. I think it's a fantastic love letter to MMA and UFC's work here in China, and I really hope it elevates the Chinese MMA scene globally. So I think the documentary itself is a fantastic love letter to Chinese MMA, and hopefully will be something that can promote the MMA scene globally. Now, Brian, I have to ask as a follow-up question, is there any other examples in the documentary you think of stories that act as a cultural bridge connecting Chinese MMA to the global MMA scene?
Another aspect of the film that I thought really captured this cultural bridge concept was the story of Zhang Weili and the role that Rubin Payan Jr. played in kind of her ascent to becoming the world champion. Rubin was a former U.S. Marine that came to China thinking it would just be a short visit, and it turns out that he spent a number of years, probably almost 8 years here. And part of his journey ended up being serving as Zhang Weili's conditioning coach. And just the story of how people's lives intersect and how China really changed his life, but also how Zhang Weili had this amazing story of success as the first Chinese UFC champion, I think really epitomizes just how the role of sports can really change people's lives and bring them together.
Well, thank you for that insight, Brian. And I want to take a moment now at the conclusion of this discussion to thank all of our panel participants for their time. We really appreciate it, and I hope it offered some fresh insights to all of the viewers at home. Good work to everyone involved in this, and I want to thank everyone for taking the time to chat with us today. And then to all our viewers at home, if you enjoy what you saw today, we encourage you to head over to our social media accounts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, and give us a follow for more incredible content. Of course, be sure to check out our website, where episode 1 of Way of the Warrior is now available to rewatch. Episode 2 will be officially dropping at the end of this month, so make sure to check back and to let your friends know. Again, thank you all for joining us, and we hope to see you next time.